To grow. Verb. To spring up, to increase, to expand. To develop. To have an increasing influence. To cultivate, to raise, to produce, to breed, gather, glean, to harvest, ripen, bloom, and to advance. To promote the development of. I think we all know what it means to grow. We grow up, we grow old, we grow wiser, but past all that, there's something else, something deeper. Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. Stay with me and you'll bear fruit. Or put another way, stay with me and you'll grow. But what does that mean for us? In 2020, in West Michigan, in our homes, in our communities. What does that mean for us, knowing that the message of the gospel seems irrelevant to the younger generations? What are we going to do to help connect with teens and young adults? Are we willing to abandon our comforts and preferences to reach people who need the gospel? Are we willing to allow this younger generation to shape our church culture and help us reach others? Are we going to sit on the sidelines and wait for someone else to do the work for us? Or are we willing to work hard and be growing young?
So this is the 10th and final message in the Growing Young series. I know, as I admitted last time that I had the opportunity to speak to you, that there is a known degree of growing young fatigue in the church family. And I understand that. 10 weeks is a long time to spend in something that normally for us would be like a series that's going through a book of the Bible. And so to be topical for 10 weeks is sort of unusual for Olivet, but we really thought that the content of the Growing Young book and the research and what it was saying to the church was very, very important. So the challenge for me today was to sort of wrap this whole thing up. And I want to be honest with you about two thoughts that I had. The first thought that I had was, listen, people are kind of sensitive about this. There are misunderstandings about this, thinking that the Growing Young series means that we're only concerned about the young people and that we want the church to be geared exclusively for them, which is not true, but aware of that sensitivity. And then the second feeling that I was having was, okay, here's people feeling that way, but I really felt I needed to be as bold and as blunt as I possibly could, because this is something that we don't want to be just a 10-part series and now it's done and we move on from that. We really hope and we really intend that at least the ideas and the challenges of Growing Young will be a part of how our church looks at ministry moving forward. And I think it's a very biblical perspective. If you look at Scripture, there was always that intentional reaching back to the younger generation and preparing them and pulling them up into leadership. And then my mind went what I would consider to be sort of a strange direction. I started to think about World War II. I thought about that not because I grew up during World War II. I hope I don't look like I did. Not because I personally experienced the trials and tribulations of World War II, but because I've always been fascinated by the World War II generation and what we call the greatest generation. You're familiar with that phrase? That those who grew up during, experienced, and fought in World War II are America's greatest generation. And so the more I've looked into that, the more I've read that, the more I understand why they say that. World War II was an incredible time in the United States. It was a time of really pulling together as a nation. It's something that happened, unfortunately, so very briefly after 9/11. After 9/11, for a short time, for a matter of maybe just of weeks or at most months, we really pulled together as a nation, but then we started to very quickly pull back and do our own things and have our own perspectives again. But World War II was a matter of years where there was quite literally something for everyone to do to contribute to the war effort. And that's why I entitled this message, Something for Everyone, because I realized that we've lost that idea of there's something for everyone to do in the church. And so I want to talk about World War II for a minute and tell you how I want to apply that to growing young in the life of Olivet Church. So during World War II, everyone got involved. Obviously, there were those who enlisted and went and trained and then fought. There were those that left the country to do that. But by no means was it the effort that was only on the part of those that were actually enlisted in the military. In fact, during World War II, because of all that was involved in the war effort, how big the war effort was, those that stayed in the United States had to submit to rationing. And by rationing, I mean that gasoline and food and clothing and even tires. I mean, you got a booklet and it told you how many times over the course of however long the war was going to take, you could get tires, for example, for your car. And so you were very careful about how you allotted those things that were rationed to you. And this, I put this poster from the war effort in the PowerPoint today because this is one of the things that I saw online that sort of really clearly told me I cannot baby around with this topic, that I need to be bold and blunt today about this. Because during the time that they were rationing gasoline, for example, one of the things that they wanted people to do was to carpool. And so if you were looking at the screen, you saw that first poster, which was a car full of people with the question, room for one more? Well, obviously not. It was an exaggeration. But then this one confronting those who were being selfish and saying, if you choose to drive your car and use your gasoline and to ride alone, when you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. Is that not a bit bold and confrontational? They're taking the people who say, no, I'm going to do my thing and I'm going to do it my way and I don't care how that impacts anybody else. And they're literally calling them a traitor. Jesus said about those who got with his program compared to those who didn't get with his program, he said, you're either for me or you're against me. You either gather and pull more people in, or you scatter and you disperse people. And I take that challenge very seriously. We think that there's a fair amount of neutral ground in the church and neutral ground in how concerned we are about those who are lost. And I'm going to tell you that I don't think the Bible allows us to be neutral at all. We're either for or we're against. We're either gathering or we're scattering. The people of the World War II era understood that. Victory gardens. I never really heard a lot about it. I heard the phrase victory gardens. But I didn't really understand what was going on in the country during that time. There was two things going on that were really led to victory gardens. The first was this. With the massive number of people who were enlisting and going to actually serve in the military, a lot of the people in the farming and rural communities were gone. And so there were fewer people doing the farming, which led to a degree of crisis as far as food supply was concerned. And then secondly, so much of the food that was harvested was then prepared, canned, boxed, however they did it, and it was sent overseas to take care of our soldiers and fund or provide for the war effort. So victory gardens were a way, and they told anybody, if you own, if you rent, whoever you are, wherever you are, take even a small available piece of land and plant a garden on it. Because we need people to be as self-sufficient as possible. Don't wait for someone else to feed you. You plant your own garden and you do the best you can to feed your own family yourself. It was a way to get ahead of potential food shortages. Next, scrap drives. Because so much was going into the war effort, they were asking people to bring everything that was, to not put things in landfill, but to take paper, to take rags, to take metal, and to bring them to recycling places or to bring them to scrap drives so that there was metal available for tanks and jeeps and bullets and bombs and everything else. And so that rags were being collected and brought in because clothing was in short supply. Uniforms were in short supply. So don't throw anything away. Bring it and let us recycle it. Let us turn it into things that can be used for the war effort. Same with paper. Next, and this was a biggie, Rosie the Riveter. Notice the workforce changes, and this iconic poster of Rosie the Riveter and then this one saying we need women to join the workforce. Listen to this. This was an amazing thing to me. At the time of World War II, the population of the United States was approximately 112 million people. Less than half of what we are now. We're now approximately 330 million people in the United States. But of 112 million people, 11 million of them. Anybody that has a phone on, you can turn it off now if you want to. That's cool. We'll let you do that. Don't be afraid to dig into your pocket or your purse with it. We'd rather have that. So here we are, 11 million, almost 1 out of every 10 people is going to participate in the war effort. Mostly men, but a lot of women as well. What did that do? That left a huge void in the workforce. And so they were encouraging women, we need you. We need you to come to work. We need you to be in factories as factory workers. Building the things that people are still using in their everyday life, but especially building the things that we need to engage in this war. And the workforce participation of women during World War II went from approximately 20% before World War II to almost 40%. Double the number of women in the workforce. And as you probably realize, we've never gone back to the way it was before. So, workforce changes and participation. And here's where I'm going with this. We look at all that people sacrificed, all that people changed, all that people did. And I don't want you to think that I think for a minute that absolutely everyone was excited about doing this. I don't think so. As essential, as much as it was, touted in posters that everybody needs to be a part of this, I don't think everybody was excited about. I don't think everybody wanted to do it. But here's what they realized. Everybody needs to do whatever they can to make this war effort a success. We need everyone. And so think about the church and think about our community and our society. Are we not in a war? I don't know if we always think about it that way, but I know oftentimes in conversation, when we talk about what's going on in our culture, when we talk about what's going on in the world around us, we realize we are in a war. We are in a culture war of sorts. But I think oftentimes we get it wrong in this way. That we allow the fact that we are in a war to make us self-protective instead of sacrificial in the way we approach things. In other words, I'm just going to pull everything that's dear to me together. I'm going to pull those that are dear to me close to me. I'm going to put up fences. I'm going to build walls. I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep the culture from impacting my family, instead of realizing that outside of the walls of this church and in our community are a lot of people who are the victims of this war. We think it's the people around us, and in a sense, I know it is people. But the Bible has a perspective that we need to understand, that it's not really those people that are the enemy. And I know I say this frequently, but I'm going to say it again. You can't look at the opposite-minded, and if you want to think of them as wrong-minded people, in many cases you're right, but you can't look at the people in the culture around us that are opposite-minded of us and call them the enemy. Because here's what God says. Be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. Put on all of God's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against all strategies of the devil. For, or because, we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies. We are not, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. So behind what is obvious to us is the real force that we're fighting against. And we as a church family need to pull together and have that World War II mindset of, hey, we're in a war, and we need to do whatever we can to make ourselves effective in this effort. One more, 1 Peter 5:8. Stay alert, watch out, for your great enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. So the challenge for me today is to try to make this so practical that there's nobody that walks away from here that thinks, well, I'm glad that the church spent 10 weeks talking about that. I don't think there's anything that I can do. I don't think there's anything that I have to contribute. If you walk away from here today, and it's either because of a lack of proper communication on my part, or maybe because your heart just isn't into this, and you walk away and say, I either cannot or I will not do anything about helping the church grow young, then can I be so bold as to say, I think you're driving away with Hitler in your car. I'm going to piggyback off a war poster and say, I think you're missing the point. This isn't about me, and it's not about you. It's about Jesus. It's about the gospel. It's about reaching people. It's about realizing that we're in a war, and both the captives, the victims, the prisoners, and those that are rescued are the people around us that we're called to make a difference in the lives of. And sometimes it's the people that are outside the church completely. They're out in the community. They have no church home. They need to be thought about, cared about, and brought in too. But what a tragedy, what an incredible tragedy that the church can be so unintentional and unfocused about this, that we see young people that are born into the church, that are raised in the church, that go through children's ministry and youth ministry, and then when we graduate them from high school, give them a gift and send them out the door, they never come back. What's happened there? I'll tell you, in part what's happened is we had 18 years to show them that they were a vitally important part of the church, and we failed to do it. We cannot allow that to happen. So what can you do? What can I do? What can we do? I believe that there are things that everyone can do without exception. Every saved child of God, every believer in Jesus Christ, there is something that you can do, and I'm about to tell you what those things are. I'm going to be as practical as I possibly can. So much so that probably a fourth grader could have given this message, because this is all basic stuff. Here we go. First thing you can do is pray. Now it's interesting, because even though I know better, when I first put this in the outline, one of the things you can do is pray, what rolled through my mind was, well, if you can't do anything else, you can pray, as if prayer is sort of a last resort or unimportant, or that's for the losers to do thing. And that is absolutely not true. That's not what I want to convey. Prayer is the first thing, and in reality, prayer is the most important thing. But prayer is not the only thing. Do you understand the difference? To pray, to work without pray is to work ineffectively. To pray without work is to presume on God's grace. But when we pray and then do what God promises to do, that's powerful and effective prayer. I love this verse. It's the prelude to one of Jesus' parables, but it simply said, one day Jesus told his disciples a story to show that they should always pray and never give up. That's how important prayer is. So important that Jesus told stories to illustrate this simple reality, that we should always be a people who pray and never give up. You say, well, I don't know how to pray, or I don't know what to pray for. Got good news for you. Romans 8:26. And the Holy Spirit helps us in our weakness. For example, we don't know what God wants us to pray for. God, I don't know what to pray in this regard. I don't know who to pray for. Do I pray for me? Do I pray for them? Do I pray for staff? Do I pray for leadership? Do I pray for the students? Do I pray for the kids? Who do I pray for? Okay, here's the answer. You're confused and you don't know who to pray for? That's okay. Just pray, just engage God in prayer, just go to Him and admit to Him that you don't know exactly how to pray, and here's what happens. But the Holy Spirit prays for us with groanings that cannot be expressed in words. So if you don't know what to pray for, don't use that as a reason to not pray. Just go to Him and say, God, I don't know what to pray for, and He'll take it from there. That's a cool promise. Ephesians 6:18, pray in the Spirit at all times, and on every occasion stay alert and be persistent in your prayers for all believers everywhere. And I put that in part because not only it talks about the importance of persistent prayer, but the fact that this is not just praying for those outside the church, though that's important and we should be. But pray for each other, that together we'll collectively catch this vision, that together we'll hold each other accountable in this, that together we will say, wouldn't be able to do this by myself, but together we can get this done. It's a something for everyone war effort. Next, you can intentionally look. Now, intentionally is the key word here. You can intentionally look for those newer, those younger, and those needing connections. There's an amazing thing about our eyeballs. I'm not going to get into the science and physiology of eyeballs because that's way over my head. But there's an amazing thing about the way our eyes and our brain interact. And here's the amazing thing. There's a sense in which you see what you expect to see, right? That's why when you write a document and you try to proofread it yourself, one of the biggest problems with proofreading a document that you wrote is that your eyes and your mind see what you expected or intended to write. And man, sometimes I write some really stupid documents because I write them and I go, well, that's not what I meant, but that's what I typed, and then my eyes missed it when I went to proofread it myself. And so you walk into a building like our building here, this church building, and I think our default is to see what we expect to see in this building and to see who we expect to see in this building, right? So we walk in, and first of all, this building now 11 years old, to be honest, we don't think all that much about the places where the wall is marred or scuffed or dinged. We don't think that much about the fact that the carpet may not look as good as it did 11 years ago. We don't think about the stain. We don't think about the mark. We don't think about the tear. We don't think about the fact, or yes we do, but that you walk into the youth room and the youth room looks like somebody took a razor blade and sliced and diced the floor and then pulled the threads up. Because that's what we're used to seeing. And we don't realize that other people walk into the building and it's the first or one of the few first times that they ever saw that, and they're going, oh, don't they know that that wall is all gouged up? Don't they know that that color is a little bit out of date? Don't they see that the carpet in the youth room is all ripped and frayed? Yeah, we do, and yet we don't. So how does that, as important maybe as a building is, more important is seeing only what we expect to see when we come in this building and look at people. Because you walk into the building, and if you're like me, you look at a sea of faces and you are instantly drawn to, and you're identifying those people that I already know and like. I know you. I have a relationship with you. You're my friend. I want to talk to you. I totally get that. But one of the things we did early on in this series is we asked life groups to think about the younger people in the church, and people being very honest just admitted, I don't see many young people. Here's what I will not do today. I will not have everybody under the age of 30 stand up. But I guarantee you, if I had everybody under the age of 30 in this room stand up, you'd be shocked at how many of them there are. And there could be more, but we're blind to them. Our eyes don't see them because that's not what we're looking for. Now, flip that around. If you walk into a building and you tell your brain to tell your eyes to flip the switch and to look at things from the perspective of what do I need to see that I wouldn't necessarily see if I wasn't intentional. You'll walk in and you'll see things with the building that you go, that doesn't look good, we should deal with that. But again, more importantly, you will see people that you don't know. You will see people that are younger than you. You'll see people that are different from you. You will see people that you have maybe talked to one time and just said, hey, welcome to Olivet, but people that you need to engage more intentionally and get to know better. I love this. Oh gosh, I love this verse so much. Here's why I love this verse in part. Because the context of this verse is Jesus being approached by his disciples who are more concerned about lunch than they are about people. Fortunately, that's the first and only time that's ever happened in the life of the church. All right. But the disciples come back after getting some food for them and for Jesus, and they find him engaged with people in conversation. And they go, Jesus, excuse me, it's lunchtime. And Jesus speaks to their people blindness. And he says this, wake up. Wake up and look around. The fields are already ripe for harvest. The harvesters are paid good wages, and the fruit they harvest is people brought to eternal life. He goes, you guys are seeing this all wrong. You think it's all about the fact that it's lunchtime and you're hungry. It's not. It's about the fact that we're surrounded by people who are the harvest. They are what God is seeking. They are what God is wanting. Wake up. Look around. See all of the people who could be the harvest brought to God. And what honors God more? What glorifies God more? What creates celebration in heaven like people coming to Christ? Nothing. Nothing. Next, another thing everyone can do. Everyone. You can use your voice to engage and encourage. We all have a choice about who we talk to and what we talk about, right? Pretty basic. Fourth grader could say that. You have a choice about who you talk to and then what you talk about. And can I just be real honest with you? Because I don't want you to think, because this is not what I'm saying, that you can never and should never talk to your friends at church. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying there are priorities here. And if you come to church and your goal is to see and then talk to the people that you know and like, and that's what you're all about, then you're missing the opportunity that your eyes and your voice have to help you reach people, to enfold them into the culture of the church, to make them feel like they're wanted and there's a place for them to fit. What I'm saying is, talk to people maybe that you don't know first. You can make the number and the rule according to the number however you want to. If you want to say, I'm kind of a shy person, and so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get way the stink out of my comfort zone. And here's what's way the stink out of the comfort zone for me. I'm going to talk to one person that I don't know well every Sunday. Then good for you. If you're that person and talking to one person that you don't know is a stretch, good for you. Go for one. If you are an outgoing person and a gracious person and you want to say, I want to talk to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people that I don't know well before I then talk to my friends and engage them in conversation, wow, good for you. But whether it's 1 or whether it's 5, make talking to people that you sense are not deeply connecting to Olivet, make that your priority. And in this vein, can I ask you for a favor? I'm asking you, person to person, to do me a favor. During this hyper-emotional, supercharged political season, do me a favor. Leave political talk, political discussions outside of the church. Now, I know some of you right now are going, hey, buddy, you have no right to ask that. And by the way, when I do engage people in conversation, it's my friends, and I know that they think the same way that I do. We like or dislike the same politicians, and we like or dislike the same political party, okay? If that's what you're thinking, let me inform you about something. That when you get together with 1 or 2 or 3 of your friends, and you all agree about the same politician and the same party, you're not just talking to each other. Because I have before walked past a small cluster of people that were talking about their political views and so forth, and I, as a walk-by, I, as a bystander, have heard very clearly what you were saying about that politician or about what that party, whether positive or negative. And so if it's other people, and by the way, my hearing's not that great. So, I'm hearing it. Wow, it's a miracle. But if other people are walking by and there's a person who's newer to the church, a person who's younger, and they hear these people engaged in this very pointed, very animated, very maybe negative to an extent political debate, they're not going to stick their elbow in there and say, hey, I want to talk to you about what you guys are saying. Here's what they're going to do. They're going to, without expression on their face, they're going to walk by and go, I don't know if I could ever really fit at this church. This church seems to be affiliated with party and politician A, and I'm not sure. I mean, I'm growing, I'm developing, I'm changing, but right now I think I'm for party and politician B. It happens that easily. And so let's talk about the more important things. Let's talk about the encouraging things. For example, these two verses, I love this. Ephesians 4, I always say that when I put verses up. I don't know why. I guess because I love them. Ephesians 4:29, don't use foul or abusive language. That's important. But more important, let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. Just think about what you're saying and to whom you're saying it, and use words that are helpful and encouraging. Proverbs 16:24, kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. Next thing we can all do, use your ears. So we've got eyes, we've got mouth or words, we've got ears. Use your ears and intently listen to their stories and struggles. Now you are probably like me. You're oriented one of two ways when it comes to conversation. One way to be oriented in a conversation is the, hey, listen to me orientation. I have things that I want you to know about me. I have things that I want you to know that I've done. I have things that I want you to know that are important to me. I have things that I'm dreaming for the future. Listen to me. And the other orientation is to say, tell me about you. I want to hear about you. I want to hear about what you think, about what you feel. I want to hear your story. I want to hear your struggles. Which of those is the more helpful and important orientation? I will remove the mystery and tell you that the second orientation is the more powerful and the more helpful orientation. You see people and they're in a conversation with someone and that person's talking and they're pouring out their heart. Maybe they're going through something difficult and you can tell that the person that they're talking to is just waiting for their opportunity to talk. I can't wait. We had a friend, Pam and I, at one point in our lives out in California, and you could tell she could never wait. She just couldn't wait till you stopped talking so that she could jump in. And here's how you knew that she couldn't wait. All the while you were talking, she was going, and leading in, and it's like, if you take more than a quick gasping breath, I'm jumping in here. It wasn't really that fun to talk to her because it was about her and her perspective and her history and her family. Okay, I get all that. But we're talking about how to use your ears so that you bless and benefit and draw other people out and into relationship, and you become a better listener. I love what James says. James talks about that simple principle that we often say, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so listen twice as much as you speak. Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to get angry. All 3 important, but be a great listener. We've talked about this before. Job, the Old Testament gentleman, the most righteous and holy man of God on earth at his point in time, Job is challenged. Job is tempted by Satan. All kinds of trouble and calamity come up on him, and he's lost almost everything, including his own physical health and his family and so forth. And his friends come around him in his time of grief and sorrow and need, and they surround Job, and these friends are amazing friends. Until they open their mouths and start to talk. And when they talk, it's about them and it's about their perspective and it's about condemnation, and that leads to the last thing that everyone can do. All of us can guard our minds and determine to withhold superficial judgments. You know what experts say? Experts say that most of us decide in an initial conversation with someone in less than 30 seconds whether that person and us can ever get along and be friends. 30 seconds. We listen to them, we look at them, and we make a snap judgment, 30 seconds or less, whether that person and us will ever really be close. Why? Because we're looking at things like what they wear, what their hair looks like, how they talk, do they have piercings, do they have tattoos, and based on our perspective on those things, we begin to very quickly write a person off, and we cannot do that. Biblical truth, biblical essentials, absolutely, we're all about that. But even someone being on a different page as far as something that to you is a very strong conviction doesn't mean that you can't be a person who reaches out to that individual, talks to them, listens to them, etc. Here's how God speaks through Paul about not being a person who rejects people out of hand because we're judging and criticizing them. Accept other believers who are weak in the faith, and don't argue with them about what they think is right or wrong. For instance, one person believes it's all right to eat anything, but another believer with a sensitive conscience will eat only vegetables. Those who feel free to eat anything must not look down on those who don't, and those who don't eat certain foods must not condemn those who do, for God has accepted them. Now, this is only one incident in all of Scripture. He's talking about the difference between carnivores or omnivores and those that are only herbivores. Those who go, I'm a vegetarian, I'm a vegan, that's all I eat. And the number of times that they get pushback and guff from people in the faith community. Why? Why does what that person eats allow us to move into criticism mode? Don't do that. The same thing with things that we go, I would never do that to my body. There's not a single part of my body that I want to pierce, and I've never even thought seriously about a tattoo. But guess what? That's Craig. That's me. That's my personal opinion. That's my personal feelings. It's not a biblical conviction. And so I want to be careful that I don't write people off because there's something superficially causing me to judge them. Oh, by the way, he's not done yet. Who are you to condemn someone else's servant? Their own master will judge whether they stand or fall, and with the Lord's help, they will stand and receive his approval. I think what Paul is doing is he's pointing to the fact that we want to try to shape other believers and unbelievers to be exactly like us. And he goes, can I tell you something? That's not the point. The point is not to try to make somebody so that they see, believe, and do things exactly the way you do. Let God make them into the person that God wants them to be. Let God shape them. Let God deal with them. Let God correct them if necessary. But you accept them, don't condemn them. It's a powerful passage. I love it, by the way. Just got to fit that in there. I can do this. There we go. Let me quickly talk about those of us that have keys to share. And this is a most of us thing. Those first things are things that absolutely everybody in this room, without exception, can do if you choose to and choose not to ride with Hitler, okay? All of you can do those first things. I'm going to keep saying that because it's kind of controversial and I'm having fun, okay? All of you can do those first things, all of them. Some of us, many of us have keys to share. How do we do that? First, to those of you who think, well, I don't necessarily have a key to a ministry at the church, there's still something that you can share that's incredibly powerful. I hear people talking around the church all the time about their hobbies, their passions, their interests. Things like sports, things like hunting, things like fishing. And here's what I want to say. If you have a hobby, a passion, or an interest, try to find somebody younger that you can bring into relationship with you via that hobby, passion, or interest. Jody Veach. If you don't know Jody Veach, I feel sorry for you. Jody is amazing. And a couple of months ago, Jody came up to Pastor Justin McFarland, and he said, hey, I want to take you and maybe a young person or two fishing. Why? Because Jody fishes, Jody loves to fish, Jody's good at fishing, Jody knows where to fish. But it wasn't about fish. You know what he wanted to do? He wanted to give himself and Pastor Justin an opportunity to spend some really quality time with a student who was interested in fishing. And so he took his hobby, his passion, his interest, his expertise, and he used it as a way to bring someone into what I would call a ministry, or at least a ministry-based relationship. You can do the same thing with hunting. You can do the same thing with model trains, although I don't exactly know how, but you could. There's two men in the church right now who know he's talking about me. Yes, I am. But whatever your passion or interest is there a way that you could bring a younger person into it? Otherwise, can I be honest with you? That hobby, passion, or interest might be something that's actually making you a scatterer instead of a gatherer. Riding with Hitler. Okay, next. Oh man, do not post this video online. Next, take someone along when doing ministry. If you have a ministry, if you have something that you do in the life of the church, do you have to do it alone? Could you bring somebody else along in that ministry? And at this point, I want to bring my friend Caleb Sutherland onto the platform. This is Caleb Sutherland, ladies and gentlemen. He is what I like to affectionately call a youngster and my friend. And by the way, was anything different, unique, special about yesterday?
Our birthdays.
Oh, our birthdays. That's right. Your birthday and my birthday, March 7th. Buddy. Okay. So Caleb, let me give the backstory here first. Caleb is the son of Ben and Mary Sutherland, Mary, our children's ministry director. And Caleb is around the church a fair amount of the time because when your parent or parents are on staff at a church, for some reason you end up finding yourself at church more than the average person. So Caleb is around the church a lot. And during the Growing Young series, when first the staff went through it, and then when we were going through the Growing Young book and concepts with our leadership, God did something kind of significant in my life. God, as in a way that only God can, said to me, Craig, you're a jerk. Does it sound like God would talk to somebody that way? He did. Here's why. Now, here's why I say that. Because we're going through this Growing Young stuff, and here's what God kept bringing to mind for me. That all the time that Caleb's at the church, and what did you say about the reason that you're at the church a lot? What is your mom kind of... your mom's working, and she wants you to... Help her, okay? So he's got an invitation from mom to minister. But what does he do? Almost every time he comes into the church office, he goes to my office, and he goes, Pastor Craig, got anything that I could do? You got anything that I could help you with? Pastor Craig, what could I do? And what did I say 100% of the time?
Nothing.
Nothing. No, I don't have anything that you could do. I don't need your help. And so I'm at this retreat with our church leadership, and God is going, what do you think about all the times that Caleb has said, is there something I could do to help? And you've said no. And I was very convicted by that. So I came back from that retreat, and the next time I saw you, I invited you to do what?
He invited me to go, and we would go to people's houses who wouldn't, I guess you would say, wouldn't be able to maybe go to church, or like we went to the hospital, or we would just go minister and show God's love and maybe have communion. And it was great.
And what was your favorite part about those days?
Well,
you can be honest.
Well, my favorite was probably going to her name was Brenda's house. She was the nicest lady you could meet. She was so kind and loving, and she was just the best.
And she had a cat and a dog that you loved. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But when you would get in my car every day, what was the first thing you'd ask me?
Where are we going to eat?
But, see, this is the point. You know, you got a young person, and we all know that young people love to eat, and so I'd say, we're going to have lunch, and then we're going to go and visit 2 or 3 people. And he was all in, and it was totally cool that he wanted to know where were you going to have lunch, and he'd get at my coupon books, and we'd start negotiating back and forth about lunch. But ultimately, then we would go to 2 or 3 people's house and spend time with them and pray with them and serve communion that one week together. So I appreciate you being my buddy. Would you be interested in doing that again? Some more?
Yeah.
Deal. All right. That's Caleb. All right. So that's one way to do that. That's just one way to do it. But if there's something that you're doing, bring someone else along and embrace this mindset. This is the mindset. I need to get someone ready to replace me. It's not that I can't visit on my own, and it's not that I can't visit people for maybe the rest of my life. But I shouldn't be doing it alone, and there are other people who can help and then learn how to do that particular slice of the ministry and then bring someone along. And one of the things that Caleb said after we talked together and did this in the first service at Marquette campus, he said that Isaiah Staple came up to him after the service and said, I'd like to do that with you and Pastor Craig. And so we're already bringing the next younger visitation team member along with us this summer. So here's what the problem is. We have a fear factor when it comes to ministry. We get too much of our sense of identity from who we are in ministry. And so we hold ministry almost in a secretive sort of way. Like if I told somebody the secret sauce, as if there is secret sauce in ministry, right? But if I told somebody the secret sauce, then I wouldn't be needed. And if I wasn't needed, I would be less important. And if I was less important, then what's church all about? Here's what church is all about. Church is all about finding our identity in Jesus Christ first and foremost, and then about serving other people like He served them. It's not about me, and it's not about you, and it's not about us as individuals. It is about Jesus. And so push the fear factor aside. Let somebody backfill and do the ministry even better than you did it, because that's what the kingdom's all about. Real quickly, 3 ways that we can impact our community, because as I've said, this is a challenge that first and foremost goes out to the church. What we need to do so that we don't lose the young people that God gives us as babies and then become toddlers in our nursery and then become children in our children's ministry, then become youth in our youth group, and then they graduate and go, they did great ministry for me, but there's no place for me in the church. So this is about the church. This is about how we do what we do here. But there's also that important thing of how then it goes outside the walls to those who will never walk into the doors of the church unless someone from here goes out there. And here's 3 things that you can do. Number 1, volunteer. Everywhere around you, people are looking for volunteers. Your local schools are looking for volunteers all the time. If you're a parent, you know that your teacher, their class, the school is always asking you, can you volunteer at this? Can you volunteer at that? Can you go on a field trip? Can you chaperone and supervise a party that's going to go on for Christmas or Valentine's Day in your child's class? Just as much as possible, say yes to volunteering. As much as possible. If your community needs a coach in some sport, if possible, volunteer to be a coach. Volunteer to be an assistant coach. Volunteer to be the mom who brings the popsicles and the Gatorade after the game. Get involved, volunteer. Next, mentors. Pastor Justin and Mary have a wonderful foot in the door at Orchard View and Fruitport schools where we are going in and we are mentoring students. And what a wonderful, rich, and rewarding thing it is. Notice I didn't say easy, because it's not easy, because every Tuesday afternoon it is a true inconvenience for me. But this year, the young man that I'm mentoring with, meeting with every week, his name is John. I can't tell you his last name because that would be a violation, but let's call him John Smith. And I go and sit down, and you know what John Smith wants to talk to me about? John Smith wants to talk to me about the fact that his mom and dad divorced and life at home is hell. And his mom and dad fight, and he and his sister are caught in the middle of this mess. And he's got bad grades in part because home is always chaos. And he just needs someone to listen to him and encourage him. And if you can mentor, volunteer, get trained, and get involved. And here's a very practical thing that we're letting you know today you can do this summer, and that is host a neighborhood VBS. And here's how you do it. Here's our Sick at Home Children's Ministry Director, Mary Sutherland.
Hi, church family. I am so excited to share with you a practical way that you can be best neighbors in the communities where God has planted you. This year, after a lot of prayer and research and really prompting of the Holy Spirit, we have decided to take our Vacation Bible School outside the four walls of our church building and into the communities right where you live. We will be hosting backyard Vacation Bible Schools. Now you might be thinking, 5 days with kids in my front yard or my backyard. No, what we're asking is that you prayerfully choose a day that you can invite your neighbors, the children in your neighborhood, into your front yard, your backyard, under your shade tree, to host a party with a gospel message. You choose the duration, how long it's going to be, whether it's an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. You choose the date, you choose the location, and we will equip you with everything else that you need. This is a way that you can be on mission together as a family or as a life group, where you can go into the communities and connect with people who wouldn't traditionally come into a church building. So we're excited to be launching this summer, and we will be having further information, vision casting, and a meal to tell you more and to equip you more so that you can be the best neighbors in the community where God has planted you.
What a great idea. One day, and you choose the duration, but they will provide the resources so that you can do games and activities and have people come alongside you and help you so that is a really meaningful outreach and connection to your neighbors, the children in your neighborhood. I want to challenge you and leave you with this verse, Galatians 6, 9, and 10. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. Not grow weary. Keep on keeping on. Not let this just be something that we spent 10 weeks on and then yawn and scratch your back and walk away. Therefore, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone, especially those in the family of faith. Here's the closing challenge. Don't grow weary. Refuse to grow weary. There was a beginning and an end duration to the sacrifices that people made during World War II. There was. 3-4 years that rationing was happening. 3 or 4 years of some really hard deprivation almost. But it was for a reason. It was for a unified effort. And this cannot just be a 10-week campaign. This, I really believe, is the heart of what the church has always been about. It has always been about one generation reaching the next generation so that they will know how to reach the generation after them. Let's keep doing this together. I'm going to close in prayer. The worship team is going to come with a closing song, and then we will send you out to make an incredible impact in this world. Pray with me.